Welcome to Growing Your Dental Business, hosted by dental business coach and author Penny Reed. This podcast is the ultimate resource to sharpen your focus and accelerate your results, ultimately leading to more profit at the end of every month. Here's your host, dental business coach Penny Reed.
Welcome to episode 7 of the Growing Your Dental Business podcast. This is Penny Reed. I am so excited to have Susan Gunn on the show today. Not only do we focus on helping you make money on the Growing Your Dental Business show, but we want you to know when you are. And Susan is the expert when it comes to QuickBooks in the dental practice. And she's going to share with us some great reasons why to use it. And also, we want to help you protect what you collect. Susan is a certified fraud examiner, and this is definitely someone that you want to hear from as far as knowing when you're making money, being sure that you're doing what you can to protect yourself. You can learn more by clicking the podcast tab at pennyreed.com or go straight to Susan's website at susangunnsolutions.com. So without further hesitation, let's get started with Susan. Susan, I first met you when you were helping dentists set up their accounting in this new software, or at least to a lot of us it was new, called QuickBooks. So welcome today.
Thanks, Penny. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love about you, in addition to you're just an all-around fun person, is that you're a geek like me, and you come from a corporate background. So tell me, how did you come to work with dentists and start your business?
Gosh, I will celebrate my 20th anniversary this October. That was a long time ago, wasn't it, Penny? I think I met you shortly after that, too.
We were 12.
I think so. I was going to say 11. I was going to say 11, so 12's probably right. Yeah, no kidding. I had just moved back to Texas from California, where I was working for a Fortune 500 company to care for my aging parents. Mm. And believe it or not, Microsoft had just introduced, are you ready? Windows 3.1.
Wow.
So I kind of liked these things called computers. And I took a few courses at CompUSA. I was asked to teach and write for them. I really enjoyed computers and could see the benefit from an organizational potential that they offered. My first book with CompUSA, in fact, was QuickBooks 1.0.
Wow. That
was the first software of QuickBooks. I was lured away from them by a dental automation company that was here local that sold Dentrix. And they wanted me to do what I was doing for CompUSA, was teaching QuickBooks to their dentist. But after a year, I was not doing as much teaching of the QuickBooks as I really wanted to, and it could envision that the dentist needed. And so I started out on my own. I've been using Quicken, in fact, since it was DOS. So that's why I was so valuable, I guess, to CompUSA, because I already had a working knowledge of how it would work.
That's amazing. Yeah,
I know.
I can remember when I was a dental office manager, we had Easy Dental for DOS.
Oh my.
Yeah. I'm dating myself a little bit, I guess. But we also, before I left working for him and started consulting, I did his bookkeeping, which now in retrospect was frightening because I really didn't know what I was doing. But we had QuickBooks, and this was back in the days of dial-up, and I would remote in. A lot of times I would do it from home, like on Friday afternoons or what have you, and we were doing all the backups and the different things. So, and we were high-tech back then, for sure.
That was high-tech back then.
And my dentist, I want to say, my boss, he was smarter than the average dentist at the time. He understood the importance of it. But from your perspective, because you see thousands of offices, why do you feel it's so important for dentists to have the ability to access their accounting?
Well, because they need to be able to make good, sound business decisions. If the CPA, for instance, let me give a contrast. If the CPA is doing their accounting, then oftentimes they don't even get a financial report until once a quarter, if that. They might get it once a year. And so what I want them to do is be able to look at it at any given time and to make good, sound business decisions, not based on the bank account balance. Mm-hmm. That's big. If the information isn't available for what they've spent and where, then it's hard for them to anticipate what's ahead. So I just can't imagine having $1 million practice and not knowing how much has been spent, for instance, on employees.
Mm-hmm.
Not having it organized together. And yet there's so many practices that have no clue.
Well, and with my clients, I ask them to send me an income statement by the 10th of the month for the previous month. And you're exactly right. And again, they need CPAs, right? I mean, nobody wants to prepare in a business like that. You don't need to necessarily prepare your own tax return without having someone else look at it. You want an expert for that. But I couldn't agree more. I mean, you have no opportunity for any mid-course corrections if you only see those numbers.
Right. Yeah.
3 times a year, 4 times a year, or once a year. So I know you are the QuickBooks expert and a dental accounting thought leader, and you really paved the way for creating a practice management chart of accounts. So can you tell us a little bit more about how this happened and what that is?
Well, it was actually a long progress. I wrote my first book 1997. That first year that I started up business, because a dentist in Colorado wanted to hire me to set up his QuickBooks. It was long before we had the ability to remote in, like you were talking about a minute ago. So he was going to fly me to Colorado. But out of frustration, realizing how much that trip would cost, he just blurted out, "You need to write a book specifically for us." So I did. That was 34 books ago, by the way.
Wow.
They've evolved over time, and in 2004, I started realizing between 97 and 2004 that the chart of accounts that Intuit was really suggesting, and it wasn't just Intuit suggesting, but all the major groups and organizations in dentistry, all of the ADA at that point, all of everybody had their chart of accounts based on tax accounting, not business management. One dental organization chart of accounts that I looked at was 9 pages long.
Oh, goodness.
I couldn't believe it. I looked at that and went, there's no chance that they are going to be the ones to be doing this. They were all using accounting numbers. They were doing everything. And I just went, this isn't helping them to understand where they are spending their money. And that's what I really wanted to key in on. And the practice management chart of accounts truly does help them understand their cost. It's practical and it's a logical organization of their expenses. It's based on, you know this, Penny, but it's based on 6 key areas of their practice. And it organizes those 6 key areas together so that when they're running a profit and loss report and they customize that report to show the percentage of income each one of those expenses are, they can find out the detail of that expense, but not to mention all of the employees are together, so they know exactly what they're spending on their employees. It is, when I finished in 2004 organizing that, I went, yeah, this is what they need to be doing.
Well, and I think that's awesome. I request reports all the time. And when I get an income statement and I have trouble discerning, or let's just say, for example, and I'm in the South, we like to say, bless his heart. One of my clients sent me his income statement and there was no line item for staff salaries. And I we were on a phone call and I said, I know that these people didn't work for you for free. Where is that? And it's just a lack of confusion on behalf of his office person that was running the reports for him. And he was like, that needs to be all in one place. So that kind of leads into another thought. Dentists have more pressure on them today than I've ever seen, as far as the management of the business and the details, and then also, more time on the clinical. What encouragement or direction can you give them as far as getting a handle on these numbers?
Well, if it's organized, then they don't have to spend a lot of thought to deciphering the reports. That's a biggie. And it might take a little time to organize it, but then the result is amazing. the other thing that I'll tell them is it's their business. And so they really, really do need to know. Just because the bank account might be good doesn't mean that the practice is healthy. Mm-hmm. And that's what you do. You tell them whether it's healthy or not. I try to help them to get organized so they know if it's healthy. But it's their business. I tell them that all the time when I speak, that everybody needs a leader. And if they're not leading, somebody else will be. And they might not like those results, which if they're not paying attention to the profit and loss report, then they wouldn't know either. Mm-hmm. And so they really need to pay attention.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I love the analogy. I always think of the movie Christmas Vacation when Chevy Chase gets the lights down out of the attic and they're in that giant ball.
Yeah.
And then he just hands them to his son. It's like, here, untangle those. That's what I see often, and I'm sure you see it even more than I do. And then usually they don't even really have a sense of urgency to unravel it unless there's a crisis. So, I always encourage my clients to be proactive and be intentional about reviewing, all of their numbers, and especially, we want to keep an eye on what we're spending as well. So how much time do you recommend that the doctors spend each week reviewing their current QuickBooks status?
Well, typically, I'll tell you, if they do the design of the chart of accounts like I suggest, mm-hmm. and I've trained them to do their QuickBooks, it might take them 2 to 3 hours a week, mm-hmm. maybe. And that's downloading their credit card charges, reviewing their payroll, sending it off. Payroll should only take about 10, 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so 2 to 3 hours max a week. And they're done. And so if they're a 4-day-a-week practice, that could easily be done on Friday morning or Monday morning, mm-hmm. Or Monday afternoon. So it really doesn't take that much time.
Well, as the business owners, as far as maybe your top things that they should be reviewing on a weekly basis, what do you recommend?
Well, from their practice management software, they should be reviewing the monthly collections report, mm-hmm. the monthly audit trail, and the monthly adjustments report. They should be comparing that with the profit and loss report from their QuickBooks. And there's a report called Expenses by Vendor Summary, mm-hmm. that I really like for them to review. Now, having said that, this report is not available in QuickBooks Online. Can we talk about the online version for just a minute?
Absolutely. Hey, you're the expert. That's what they need to know is what product they should be using. It's a lot of choices.
I don't like it. Let me be honest. I don't like it. And the reason being is the desktop version is 3 times better, more robust, mm-hmm. I guess is what I'd say. Has 3 times more features than the online version. There's no other names account. You know how we have the other mm-hmm. names in the desktop version?
Yes.
It does not exist in the online version. So this report I just recommended, the Expenses by Vendor Summary, would have everything in there. Joe's Pizza, Eckerd's Groceries. I mean, Eckerd's, that's dating me, isn't it? Yeah. Eckerd's Drugstore. Oh, wow. It would have everything in there because there would be no vendor. It would just be vendor everybody, mm-hmm. inclusive. Hotels, airlines, everything. When I designate a vendor as someone you do business with in the course of your practice, meaning only the labs, the utility companies, the person you pay rent to, whoever mm-hmm. that is, the IRS, the ADA, those are all vendors, not retail.
Right.
And so for the online version, there's no other names. It's so difficult to customize the chart of accounts to the practice management chart of accounts. And it costs 3 times more than the desktop version.
Yeah. It's going to have a long way to come before it's anywhere close.
Well, and really the only ones that benefit from that, from them going to the online version, is Intuit, because they make more money. And people were slow in migrating, honestly. I mean, people were slow in migrating, so they started bribing the pro advisors that they would give us kickbacks if we would recommend. Yeah. And so a lot of CPAs started recommending. I say, if you want access to your QuickBooks remotely, you can do that another way.
Sure.
And that would be through Log Me In, which you would have access to everything on your computer then. There's remote desktop version. Sure. I mean, the remote control for the Windows. Lots of other ways to do that than sacrificing your QuickBooks. So the expenses by vendor summary, to get back to the reports that you said, as well as the payroll reports. Really important to review those.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one area, the payroll staff salaries. I'll just touch on that for a moment. They are the largest expense in a practice, and rightly so, because we can't do it without the team. But boy, when someone comes to me and they say, do you think we need another, staff member here, here, or here? The first thing I want to know is, well, what are we currently spending now? And what would you need to do in order to, in other words, maybe you already have that in your budget, or if not, we need to figure out how to be more productive with who we already have, because if it's not costing me anything as a team member to bring another person on board when we're busy, why wouldn't I just simply wave the flag and say, hey, Dr. Gunn, I need help, right? Because it doesn't really affect me if the bottom line is great or not. It's how some team members think. So not all. There's some great ones out there.
Well,
first of all, the business owner has to know.
I actually had a doctor ask me one time, well, but it looks like I'm spending so much on my employees, but I'll tell you, they're all busy. And I said, well, you're either spending too much on your employees or you're not making enough money doing it. And I said, because this percentage, I think he was like 39% or something of his income. Yeah, it was pretty high. And a lot of the dentists don't have a clue. I set up one dentist, get ready for this. I set up one dentist, and by the time he paid taxes, he lived in a high tax area. By the time he paid taxes, he paid AFLAC, he paid insurance. He did everything for his employees. He spent 54% of what he earned on his employees.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. He had no idea.
Well, I'm sure.
Because it had never been organized in such a way that he knew.
Well, and what a struggle, especially as today's dental economy gets tighter. Hey, let's face it, supply costs continue to increase, rent increases, property value increases, and yet the reimbursement for dental procedures is, as I've been telling my clients lately, mama ain't coming. Like, it's not going to just miraculously get better and cover up all, make up for all of the increased cost. We've got to be smarter about how we work, and we've got to be aware of where we are. I think that's huge.
Right.
So tell me, and I know I remember back, and you may even want to remind me how many years ago this was, if it was 10 years ago, back when you were going through your certification to become a fraud examiner, a certified fraud examiner. And I know that's an integral part of your business. How did you decide to add this service to your existing business?
Oh, yeah, it's one of those heartbreaker stories. It's been 12 or 13 years ago, I think now. I had a previous client in East Texas, somebody locally that I had trained the front office person to do QuickBooks, and I kept telling the doctor, come up here and learn this, please, so that you can also oversee everything. And he was the nicest guy, also really good looking too, by the way, but the nicest guy, and wore cowboy boots to the practice. And, it's always the nicest guys who get embezzled from.
Sure.
And so she took him, really took him, I think $300,000. He gave me a call and he said, you're not going to believe this. I've learned my lesson. And I was so ticked. I, like you and like all the consultants that I know out there, we have a very protective nature of our clients. We're like mother hens to them. And I've trained them to be hugely successful, not to be embezzled from. And so when she took advantage of him, it really ticked me off. And that's when I I decided I already had a criminology background, and I took business law and law in college, and had worked for a corporation in security. So I had a pretty good idea of what needed to be done, and I just decided becoming a certified fraud examiner would give me another avenue for protecting my clients.
Well, and for that, I'm grateful. I gave your name out just last week to a dentist that contacted me, and it was one of these FYI. We found out that we hired a team member a couple of years ago that they just brought charges. Well, she was actually convicted by the grand jury on embezzlement from another practice. And
oh my,
yeah, which I know that this podcast is not on hiring. That's another thing altogether. But they did do a background check on her, which this hadn't shown up yet, but they did not check. They did not call all of her prior employers. They only called her most recent one. Had they called this other one that was on her resume, they would have gotten an earful. So this doctor asked me, he said, tell me about you coming in and doing an audit in my office. And I said, well, do you mean like a practice analysis? He said, no. To take a look and see, if you can tell what she may have done here. And I said, well, I could look at your audit trail report and possibly find something, but more than likely I would miss, it's sort of the difference between, and this may not be the best analogy, but if you've got a really complex looking root canal, or you've got some wisdom teeth with some scary roots, you want to send those to the specialist. Yeah, I said, I'm really not the person. I'm flattered, but you really don't want me. You want someone that, you only want to pay for this one time. And so, I send people to you because that is a skill set that some people may think, oh, well, sure, I can look at that. Well, yeah, I can look at that report too, but I don't know all of the things to look for when it comes to the embezzlement piece. So let's talk a little bit about the profile of the embezzler. Who embezzles from a dental practice?
Well, thank you for the referrals.
You're welcome.
Just about anybody. I've had everything: front desk, hygiene assistants, spouse. Had a really big spouse case. Bookkeeper, a CPA. That was about 5 or 6 years ago, when the CPA does all the bill paying and all the responsibility falls on them. I've had just about everything. I've been called in for an embezzlement, actually gone on site for it and found a drug ring. I found forgery. I found everything from $647 to $1.1 million. And yes, that can happen in a dental practice.
Wow, that 1.1 million, which any embezzlement is enough to just make you angry, but that made my hands sweat and my blood boil a little bit. As much of an investment, not only work-wise, but when you think about everything that a dentist has to do to even get into practice, the amount of debt, the amount of risk, it's just infuriating.
Yeah, and the 1.1 million, the nicest guy, I got to tell you, he hired the front office manager 2 years after he had been in practice, and it was over a 10-year period of time. So imagine 10 years. Here's the deal: 10 years of babies being born, kids graduating from high school, a kid getting married, and all there. He said if he'd have known that he paid for her the daughter's wedding, he would have had an extra piece of wedding cake. It's just wretched to go through that, but I walk through them every step of the way. I compiled all the evidence. I did all the investigation remotely until I needed to go on site, and I actually interviewed her with her attorney and came back, got everything ready for the FBI, and handed it over. 10 3.5-inch binders of evidence.
Wow.
And and you just walk away going, how do you do something like that? I have a new presentation called Unrelenting Greed, the Mind of an Embezzler, and I based it on that case and several others that I've investigated, because there's some common themes through that. But it amazes me. Everybody always asks me how could they do that, but you can't answer that question.
Sure.
Because you're thinking about it from your own perspective. You would never do it. I would never do it. And most people wouldn't, yet there are a group of people out there that would, without any conscience at all.
Well, and you touched on before what a betrayal something like this is.
Yeah.
And also thinking about who embezzles. I know there was a client that, often it's the embezzlement that then fuels them not only to hire somebody like you, but also to hire somebody like me. It's like, okay, I obviously have not been paying attention to what's going on in the practice, and I need to, reinvest my energy there, to get things back on track. And this one office that hired me, the person that worked for them had worked for them for 7 years. She went to church with them, and she told them once they caught her, this is the reason that I don't know what made her confess this, maybe to clear her conscience. I took this job because I knew you would trust me. In other words, she had intent from the get-go to defraud them.
That's not rare, by the way. That's not rare. I cannot tell you the number of times that embezzler goes from practice to practice to practice, because the doctor will just figure out some way to fire them and move on. They don't want to prosecute, and that's one of the reasons. If you've got the evidence, then you should file a police report. Leave it to them to let the police and the grand jury to bring the charges up. But you have to do your part, or you're just perpetuating the crime.
Yeah, like a serial embezzler for sure.
Yeah, wow. Absolutely. And there's so many stories out there.
Oh, I bet.
That they start off stealing petty cash. They pad their payroll with a number of hours because nobody's watching. And they'll do it and then wait and see if anybody's watching, if the doctor says anything. And then they'll do something else and then wait and see if the doctor says anything or ask any questions. And once they've determined that no one is watching, which is step one, by the way, in Unrelenting Greed, the Mind of an Embezzler, the new speaking thing that presentation I have, that is the first step. Make sure no one's watching. There are actually 7 steps. I figured it out. There's 7 steps to stealing from a dentist.
Wow.
And it's very intriguing.
Which we won't share those today because we have such a broad audience. Yes. But it's also, when you mentioned they set out with the intent to do that, and then, that no one's watching. Don't you often find that it's that person that the doctor says, oh, even I'm replaceable, but there's no way that we could ever replace, Jane.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and Jane's at the office till 8:00 at night, and she's here until 7:00 in the morning, and she doesn't want anybody else to touch X, Y, and Z. Not to say that's always the case, but that's definitely a sign.
Well, and that's what one of the practices that I've worked with felt like for their office manager, was that she was irreplaceable because, oh my gosh, it took a week to do payroll. And I just went, what? It took a week? No, 20 minutes. And they said, no, it took her a week. And so there's no telling what she was doing behind closed doors, by the way. I mean, I did find out what she was doing behind closed doors, and it wasn't good. But anyways,
well, you mentioned as far as what all is embezzled. I mean, what are some other things? Like I've heard stories about, the dental supply companies sell all sorts of nifty things now, right? Don't they sell for the patient's comfort, iPods, people, there's practically no limit, I would imagine.
Well, that's why they have to oversee their expenses and be able to pull up their QuickBooks reports to know what they're buying.
Sure.
And so if they see out of control production expenses, then they need to look into what exactly went into that amount.
Sure. So you mentioned the 1.1 million. Is that the largest amount you have investigated, or?
Thankfully, it's not the largest amount out there. I think the one that's on record is Sandy Springs, Georgia, not very far from you.
Wow.
Yeah, it's 2.2 million.
Oh my goodness.
And that was huge.
That
But
is huge.
no one was overseeing payroll.
Mm-hmm.
She actually had her husband and her daughter on payroll, and they had charge cards. So there was some no oversight at all. And so that's the one thing I tell is that you have to have oversight.
Absolutely.
In some form.
Well, and it's the whole, you'll either pay the price in a little self-discipline now, or you'll pay it in huge regret in huge regret and possibly debt. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, because you don't have that money that you earned later. So right. Tell me about these, the profile or these embezzlers. Are they just poor and they need the money? Gosh, we feel so sorry for them, because, if they had more money, they wouldn't steal. Is that what motivates them? I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah, really?
Yes, just a little.
Well, that's why I like you, Penny.
Oh, well, thanks.
One sarcastic person to another. Absolutely not. They are greedy and entitled. The doctor, I helped the doctor build this practice, therefore I deserve it. Look at the car the doctor's driving. Look at the house the doctor lives in. I work just as hard as the doctor does, so why am I not getting as much money? I know how much the doctor is pulling out of the practice, and so I'm entitled. And it's all about greed. I've not had not one case, where they really needed the money. Like a spouse was out of a job, or maybe they had a sick kid, or they had medical bills. Not one.
Wow.
I know they exist, but I've not had one. And so, yeah, I don't feel a lot of sympathy when they choose to steal, because they will get caught. And sometimes I think, Penny, they keep stealing. There's two types of thieves. The opportunistic one that just seizes the opportunity, and the brazen one that goes from practice to practice to practice. And so the opportunistic one will feel guilt. The brazen one plans it and doesn't feel anything at all. And so I just, the opportunistic one might need the money, maybe. The brazen one, not at all.
Sure. It's almost 100%. Like they're like a gambler or some other
it's an addiction.
Addictive type thing. It's like they just can't stop themselves. So,
and they're really good at playing. They're great actors. So they'll do everything they can to look majorly efficient. Like what you stated a little bit ago, the doctor could never part with them because they're so valuable to the practice. And I've had them actually, the really weird conversations I've had with doctors is when they know something is going on and they simply decide to look the other way. And it breaks my heart, because I know that it's always been the front office manager some kind of manipulative hold on them. Maybe the doctor's not choosing to be ethical, and they're afraid. I've had them actually say, I'm not exactly ethical in my practice, so I think we won't do an investigation.
Wow. So with all of the responsibilities that a doctor has as a business owner, not to mention that little thing called taking care of patients, it can be overwhelming. So what are a handful of simple things that you can tell dentists that they can begin to oversee in their practice?
The key word in what you just said is oversee. They really do need to oversee their practice. They have to be the leader of the practice. That's not a simple thing, but it is a necessary thing. They have to be the leader. They have to pay attention. They have to use their ears to listen, use their eyes to see. That's what I tell them in the courses. But the reports that I mentioned before as business owners that they needed to review, from the practice management software, if they will compare their monthly collections report with a QuickBooks profit and loss report to make sure they're not completely off. There are some things that will affect that, like care credit fees and credit card fees that may be taken out before it's being deposited. Credit card refunds will affect that amount, but there's some things that they can do to align that so that they can have a back-to-back accountability between the practice software and QuickBooks. They need to review their adjustments report. I could speak forever on adjustments, by the way.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, it's a huge nightmare area, and if they don't organize it in such a way that it goes out of control big time, and it's a huge embezzlement area. They need to oversee. They need to just watch the practice and see what's happening. So those are some key areas just to pay attention. I mean, that really is a biggie.
Sure.
One of the things that came out when I've interviewed employees after an embezzlement is that they almost always said, we kind of thought something was going on. And so being the leader of a practice and having an open door policy that an employee is not going to be shunned or put down or disregarded, but is actually going to be heard if they suspect something going on, that's really important.
So true.
So those would be some valuable things to keep in mind.
Awesome. Well, so if they don't know where to start, if they're so overwhelmed that they don't even know where to begin, how can you help them?
Actually, a lot of people don't want to do an investigation. A lot of them don't want to commit to even a financial practice analysis, which is one of the services I have. And so I started doing an Ask the Expert call, where I will remote in with the doctor and the spouse, and it has to be the doctor or spouse, remote into the practice computer that they're looking at, and will review with them a 2-hour phone call, review with them what they're looking at, how to better organize some things, how to have that back-to-back accountability, what they need to do to get that. Just so they've got a little bit tightened systems and procedures. That's probably the biggest thing right now is I just want to make sure they're protected. And so this 2-hour phone call is not expensive and really will give them a heads up in what they need to do for homework, and if they want to call me back and we go to the next step. The other thing is that if we remote in and we're doing this and I see something that's fraudulent or a huge glaring warning sign for embezzlement,
red flag.
Yeah, then what they've spent on that phone call goes towards the practice analysis.
Wow.
If they just want to do an analysis.
Well,
so it's my way of helping them, because I get a lot of phone calls, Penny, that they don't really know, and the big deal is they don't want to believe that someone they've trusted is stealing from them. And so this is a little bit better emotional approach for them to say, hey, let's do a 2-hour phone call. Let's just see. Let's go in and look, and maybe there's some things that you can tighten up and some procedures and systems that you can put into place so that you know what you're looking at too.
Sure. Well, and I think having them be there with you while you're looking, it's a co-discovery process. So even it just sounds, it's just like with the patients being afraid to come into the dental practice. If we talk about, something big and scary, like a root canal, or you wouldn't, periodontal scaling and root planing, this is a simple discovery process. And it just seems safer, probably, I would imagine, in their mind to start there, to know that, hey, I don't necessarily have to launch a full-blown investigation. I can see some of the things that I need to be looking for. So I think that's brilliant that's a starting point for you.
Well, and the cool thing is that if there isn't anything there, it doesn't guarantee that we're going to find anything either.
Sure.
I mean, there could still be embezzlement in there, but we're only talking about a 2-hour phone call.
Right. Looking for some of the key indicators. So
I'll look for the key things that I normally see, and then leave it up to the doctor. It's always up to the doctor what they want to do. Always. I'm just here to help in whatever way I can. I'm with them on this. I stand with them. That's what I've started telling them this last year, because I truly stand with them.
Well, and so many times they feel, I think even in the partnership practices on things like this, as we're having more partnership practices, and not to mention the multi-locations, which that just gives more people the opportunity to not have some supervision on a lot of these things, and we need even more safeguards. But often they feel like they are alone in this. They were not, just like with a lot of the practice management things, this was not a skill set that they learned in dental school. And as technology has just taken off, off and running, there's more and more places for people to hide and be doing things that are inappropriate. So I think,
well, and that's why I've started telling them, I'll do whatever you want to do. Just because I don't have a service advertised on my website doesn't mean I wouldn't customize something for the doctor.
Sure.
Because they don't all want the same thing. There's no cookie. When you're talking about embezzlement, or you're talking about the potential of embezzlement, there's no cookie cutter solution.
Sure.
And so,
well, and I would imagine in a few years there'll be people. Hey, these people are creative. They will have come up with new ways to take advantage of the dental business owner, for sure. So,
just when I think I've seen it all, there's something else.
Pops up.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, I appreciate your time so much today. And for those of you that would like more information on Susan, please check out the podcast tab. And Susan, I look forward to seeing you on the road or at one of our next dental consulting brain trust meetings that we have. Super secret society.
I will. I'll give you the super secret handshake at the time.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Take care.
You bet. Thanks, Penny.
Thank you for listening to the Growing Your Dental Business Show podcast. For resources and additional information, please visit growingyourdentalbusiness.com.